So just two verses. You actually have the translation on page 5 in your service booklets, but this is in the original. First, of course, we give a blessing for the privilege of having this text that has guided both of our faiths for, 3,000, 2,000 years. Thanking God for the privilege of the encounter that we get to have each and every day with God's words through the Bible. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. You make us holy with your commandments and command us to encounter the privilege of Torah. Torah actually means teaching. It's a very specific kind of teaching, a covenantal teaching. And so when you hear people talk about the Torah, they're talking about the Bible, but they're really talking about so much more. It's all of God's word. The verses. Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham Techo asher ani mare otcha etivnit hamishchan ve'etivnit kol kalev v'chein ta'asu, and let them make for me a sanctuary, that I may dwell in their midst, according to everything I show to you, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all of its vessels. This is how you will make it. And then we get a big shopping list and instructions of all the things that need to go into the building of the tabernacle, the portable tent in the desert that the Israelites used as their worship site for not just the 40 years of wandering in the desert, but actually for about another 120 years after that, until the temple is finally built in Jerusalem. About this, there's a famous story. One of the ways I think that Reverend Mark and I get along so well is we're really at heart both storytellers. And that was the model, of course, given to us by our rabbis. The Rabbi Jesus, the Rabbi Hillel, the Rabbi Elchanan, all these rabbis that we see in the Jewish Talmud, they were all storytellers, because it's through our stories that we really relate to each other. It's one thing to get a bunch of laws and a bunch of rules in a book. It's the stories that attract us. Most of you could not tell me a single law from, for example, Leviticus 19, but you can all tell me the story of Adam and Eve in the garden. You can all tell me the story of Abraham and Sarah and her barrenness. So the stories are what are the most authentic, and that's what attracts us. So it's through these stories that Reverend Mark and I share with our congregations that hopefully we get a little insight. So there's a very famous story about two brothers. And by the way, you probably know this story, but maybe in a little different version. There were two farmers. They lived on either side of a great big hill. One lived alone, one had a very big family, and every year at harvest time, each of them would reap his side of the hill, and they were always blessed with plenty. But this year, as the harvest ended, one of the brothers found himself tossing and turning every night, and he lay awake thinking, I have a big family to help bring in my harvest, but my brother is all alone. He couldn't have possibly harvested enough food by himself. But if I share mine with him, then he'll have enough. I'll do it in such a way that he'll never even notice what I did. So under the dark of night, he loads up his wheelbarrow with a few bales of wheat, and he tiptoes over the hill in the darkness, leaves it in the barn on the other side. But at the same time, his brother's also lying awake, thinking, I have plenty to eat. I just have one mouth to feed. My brother has a big family. He has so many mouths to feed. I'm sure he could use a little extra. I'm going to load up a wheelbarrow with a few bales of wheat, take it over the hill in the dark of night. He'll never know, and that way he'll have plenty to eat. And so he goes over the hill, puts the wheat in the brother's barn, and goes back home. And when they both wake up in the morning, they look in their barns, a miracle. The same amount of wheat is there that was there when I started. Oh, this must be blessed by God, and now I have even more to give my brother. So every night this is happening in the darkness. They're passing each other on the hill until one night they bump into each other. Looking at their full wheelbarrows, they realize what's been going on, and they hugged. Tradition says that God was looking on and saw that place filled with brotherly commitment, unconditional love, and God said, "This is the place where I will build my house." And generations later, that hill became the site of the temple in Jerusalem, which it remains to this day. Now, I think this is an incredible story because it declares that the holiest place on earth was built by simple love between two brothers. This story actually appears in a shortened version in the Talmud. A lot of people think the Talmud is just a book of Jewish laws. It's actually not just laws, it's a lot of stories. Because even our rabbis 2,000 plus years ago knew that stories are how we get it. That's how we relate. And when you see the story in the Talmud, immediately after, we see a line from Psalm 133 and a discussion of how one fulfills this verse. Every Jewish kid knows this. One of the first songs you learned in Hebrew school. Hine matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. How good it is and how lovely for brothers to live together. So it all ties in. Of course, if we were to tell this story in the 21st century version, the next step after deciding this was a holy hill would be for the brothers to have the land rezoned, get bids from architects, and then they would launch a capital campaign so they could start the building. I know we can all relate. Throughout human history, people have always built houses for God to fulfill this commandment, "Build for me a sanctuary that I may dwell in your midst." There was a portable tabernacle in the desert, a glorious hilltop temple in ancient Jerusalem, roadside synagogues in Morocco, or churches in Chartres, or in Bethesda, Jerusalem, Bethesda, Maryland, where I'm from. Wherever we go, our faith traditions show us that our role to follow the word is to follow the word of God as commanded in this verse. "Build me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among you." But what does it mean to build a home for God? They tell a story of Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, who liked to ask provocative questions to make his students think. And once, while sitting at a Shabbat meal, he asked his students, "Where does God live?" His students are shocked. "Rebbe, that's blasphemy. God doesn't need a house. God doesn't have a body. Why would you imply that God needs a dwelling place?" So the rabbi had to answer his own question. God resides wherever we let God in. Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Build me a sanctuary that I may dwell in you. I can read that Hebrew easily that way. We build our mikdash. We build our sanctuary. We build our community, our refuge from all the insanity that is going on in our world right now. We build it by letting God in. And we let God in, the God who dwells among us, the God who dwells in each of us. We let God in, the spark of divinity that we glimpse when we overcome our fears, our self-consciousness, our conventions of social boundaries, when we suspend our cynicism and disbelief and look directly into the eyes of the people who share our community, and then we share our stories. And by sharing the moments of our lives, moments of joy and moments of pain or sorrow, that is how, my friend, we bring God into the world. It's lovely to pass each other in the halls, on the lanai, "How are you? Good morning." Do we ever really stop, sit down, and say, I've seen you before. Tell me your story. Each of you can do that. You have the power. It's just we're all so uptight and so self-conscious, we're afraid to ask, because then we might have to tell our own. And if we're authentic and true, we have certain parts of our story perhaps we'd rather sanitize, so we don't ask. You know, communities are a lot like houses. There's a story about a carpenter who was put in charge of building a beautiful, large house by a guy who had a lot of houses. This guy had like 5 houses all over the world. This is another house. Some of you may be able to relate. So anyhow, the architect and the builder decides he could actually make some extra profit by cutting back on the quality of the materials. So he gets some second-rate lumber, inexpensive concrete, puts in some cheap wiring. He did cover it with some very nice paint. Now, when the home is completed, he invites the owner to come and see it. And the owner walks around going, "This is beautiful. Thank you so much. I appreciate so much the hard work you put into this project. But I've decided I really don't need so many houses. So I'm going to give you this house as a gift." So our communities are a lot like the house in our story. You get out of them what you put into them. And only if we take responsibility to build our house by building up our relationships to the best of our abilities can we expect the people of our communities to be there for us when we need them. So this is not something you can wait for the deacons to do or your synagogue board to do. It's incumbent upon each of us to build the community we wish to see. As my Rabbi actually is an affectionate term for rabbi, somebody who really gets you and you go to for advice and for teaching and who also is concerned with your welfare. My Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi of blessed memory used to say, the only way to get it together is together. Simple, profound truth. So as long as we're aware of our responsibilities to one another, we carry the holy presence with us wherever we go, because a truly holy community reaches beyond these walls. And a holy community is much more than a rabbi or a pastor, or even a choir, as lovely as they sound this morning, thank you. Every one of us forms a holy community. There are no extras. We create our holy place, our holy community, from our own gifts, and it allows us a way of accessing the presence of God in a comforting, time-tested manner. So many of us come to our houses of worship to experience moments of memory, and moments of memory are very holy. We have to share our memories, though. I'm sure some of you are here today, and at some point during one of the hymns, perhaps, you just thought of the day you were sitting next to your mother, your father, your sister in the church or the synagogue, and those memories come back fresh, and it's as if they're sitting there. And that moment of memory is one of the big ways we build holy community, by listening to each other's stories. We make ourselves holy, we make ourselves better human beings because we are responding to the call to create within us an open heart, a willing heart, but it's a continual process. And others may not be drawn to seek holiness in the same way or in the same place, but when we speak to those who perhaps are not as engaged as we who gather each week, let us still seek ways to accept their gifts, to meet them where they're at. And we also have to understand that there will always be those who are season ticket holders and want to be at the game every week, and those who ignore the game completely. And as God took this in stride, too, the Israelites were not an easy crowd, believe me. They were stubborn, stiff-necked, blasphemous, unappreciative. God takes it in stride, and he continued with his plans for dwelling among us. So we too should take in stride and continue our work of creating sacred space, even for those who aren't always here. I shared a story this week with the members of Bat Yam, And yesterday at our weekly Saturday morning Torah study, by the way, to which each of you, Saturday at 10 a.m., are always invited, just as I would feel very comfortable walking into this church on a Sunday morning, so too I hope that everyone here feels confident and free to come and join Bat Yam at any time to learn and to experience the Word of God with us. So anyhow, one of our members actually reflected this story back to me yesterday. So I'm going to share it with you right now, but please, Bat Yam members, you saw this story this week, if you read my newsletter, and, don't give the ending away. So there was a town where there had been no rain for many, many months, and the people asked the rabbi to beg God for help. So he prayed, and he fasted, but nothing changed. Then one night, the rabbi had a dream. Nothing. You must go and find Kalman the grocer, for only Kalman the grocer can bring the rain. Summon the Jews to the synagogue, and Kalman will lead them in prayer. The rabbi woke up and said, "This is a ridiculous dream. Kalman? He's ignorant. He's crude. That can't be what heaven wants." But the next night the dream returned, and the next, and the next. And finally the rabbi realizes, I better listen to the dream. So at daybreak he gathers the community at the synagogue. Everyone sits in silence, waiting to see what is the rabbi going to do about the drought. The rabbi walks over to Kalman the grocer and says, "Kalman, you will lead us in prayer today." And immediately the people start whispering, "Kalman? Kalman, he knows nothing. He's not a learned scholar. He's got a terrible voice. How is he going to lead the chanting and the singing? This is crazy. Aren't there more learned people, Rabbi, who could lead us?" With a look of horror on his face, Kalman looks at the rabbi and runs out the back door. But in a few minutes, he returns from his grocery, and he's holding his grocery scale. And to the congregation's confusion, Kalman raised the scale high above his head and said, "Lord of the universe, you know I'm an ignorant man. I'm impatient. I use strong language. I don't learn enough Torah. I'm not able to give much to charity. But all my life I have been honest. And this scale, where I always measure out honest weights, is my symbol of my honesty. I have little else to offer you. Please accept my deepest prayers." And then there was silence, and a moment later, the first pitter-patter of raindrops on the roof. The rain had come. The town was saved. The town was saved because the citizens learned that every member of that community, of this community, has a gift to offer. And because a humble man shared those gifts with his neighbors. So whether you're sitting up here in the, I'm going to say second row, because very few people sit in the front row, but whether you're sitting here in the second row or you're sitting all the way in the back, whether you've lived in Sanibel all of your life or you just got here last week, you have a crucial role to play in this community, in our community. And I say our community because Hine Matovu Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. It is good and beautiful when brothers and sisters live together as one. One of the amazing things, and I did this in my previous pulpit for 22 years, is when you share sacred space with a congregation of another faith, you find out, one, there's very little difference between the two faiths. But more to the point, you realize that you can do so much better together what you can't do as well separately. Each and every one of us, our powers combined, can lift darkness from the world, can heal broken hearts, can improve the health and education of so many. The pressures on us today are so great. It is so discouraging to see the work of the greatest generation. Some of those are among us today, and maybe it's incumbent upon us who were in that boomer generation to take one last leap at continuing the work of these men and women who brought us out of a Great Depression, who fought a war against evil, and to remind our nation that this
is what we stand for. And we can only do it when we're together, not when we're divided. Our community is not whole unless each person is brought into it and unless each person brings something to it. So if you bring all your gifts and all of your dreams, here you will find people ready in this moment to make those dreams come true with you. But we have to continue to dream. We have to continue to bring the offerings as we had to build that Mishkan, that tabernacle in the desert, because it took the efforts of all of us to build a place where God dwells. What's that? No one knows. Okay. Well, then I guess I'll just play along over the music. Oh, there you go. I was going to go in D, but I won't now. Okay. Va'asuli mikdash v'shachanti bitocham va'anachnu nivarech yah me'ata v'ad olam. Please join me. The English is behind me. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, proud and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Try the Hebrew with me. Ba'asuli.